Hello, and welcome to the next video in my Fantasy Grounds Unity tutorial series. In this video, I explain the launcher screen's join game functionality and how it relates to the various server options provided by the host campaign feature. I provide examples on how to use the different server hosting options, including the cloud and LAN functionality, while showing what a player will need to do in order to select the appropriate option when joining a game. So let's get started. So with this session, you can see that I am actually running two different versions of Fantasy Grounds. The one on the left is going to be the DM session, whereas the one on the right is going to be the player session. And what I'm going to do today is explain how the campaign details dictate how players are going to connect to your environment. And I'm not going to go through the process of creating a campaign today. That is already done in previous videos, so I don't need to redo that. I'm literally just going to focus on the campaign detail section here on the DM screen. And we'll begin by covering the password field. And the password field is very important. Yes, you can leave it blank, but it is highly not recommended. And the reason for that is that you want to be able to control who can actually physically connect into your environment. So if you're listed as a public cloud game, you will show up in the lobby list that is here under the Join Cloud Game screen on the player side. If you don't put a password in, someone could literally just double click on your session, start that session, and join your game, and there's no credentials required. Now, don't get me wrong, that's great if that's what you're looking to allow people to do, but it can be problematic. If you've got a private campaign running and you only want the players that are more or less authorized to connect to that campaign to actually connect into your Fantasy Ground session. So it is highly recommended to go through the process of actually entering in a password. The next field I want to cover is the GM name field here. And it's actually got a different meaning between these two particular screens. The GM name field on the DM screen is how you as the DM will appear to your players inside of the chat screen. So you could put Crypt Master, Dungeon Master, the boss, whatever you want to put in there, and that's how you will be displayed within the chat window when you go in and add information type in information into that particular chat screen. On the join or on the player session, that is actually going to be how a player is going to find your campaign if you're hosting a private session or it's a public session and they really don't want to scroll through this whole list. And that actually equals the username that is associated with your Fantasy Grounds account. That is how you're going to be discovered when they type in the name here. So if you think about it, it's a quick way to search for your session without having to scroll through the entire list of the cloud games that are listed. The next thing you'll want to decide is what server type you want to utilize and whether it's cloud or LAN. Cloud has two options, and that is a public and a private listing. And when you have the cloud set to public listing, your game is going to show up in this lobby list. And what players will look for is your username, which is this username here in the lower left portion of the Fantasy Grounds banner, as well as the name of your campaign. Or they could just look for one or the other. They could also short circuit that by simply typing this account name here into the GM name entry box here and click start, and it will automatically go through the process of finding your game and beginning the process of connecting. If you list it through private, your game will not be displayed in this list. And the player will have to manually go through and enter in your account name. Again, it's this part here. And then begin the process of connecting by hitting start once they've got that going. If, however, you want to utilize the LAN functionality, you're going to want to keep three things in mind. One, are you running it off of your own system? If that's the case, you want to make use of localhost as the name that you'll connect to. However, you do that by typing that information in here as a player. So you would put in like localhost, provided I can spell right, and then click start. The second option is if you're having a LAN party. And because I'm recording this during the COVID-19 social policies that we're under, I highly recommend you don't do that just yet. for full disclosure. But once we're through all of this and things return to, well, mostly normal, then yeah, if you decide to host a LAN party, then what people will do is you will provide them your internal IP address, which I have blacked out here, and they'll use that information to be able to connect in your session. And you would do something along these lines to get connected, to be able to actually go through and connect to that particular system. Finally, the last option is to connect using an external IP address. And there is a bit of a catch with the external IP address. And again, I've got this information blacked out. And again, they would type in the information into the join by IP import section and then begin the process of connecting. But these players are going to be outside of your network. And that could mean being international, from the country that you're currently living in, could be just down the street, could be your neighbor, so on and so forth. They will be outside of your network, although your neighbor could potentially piggyback off of your Wi-Fi if it spreads out far enough. But that's another topic entirely. The problem with the external capabilities is that you, as a dungeon master, now have to be familiar enough with being able to manipulate port forwarding rules on your firewall or router in order to be able to allow players to get connected. And essentially that means that you have to go through the process of opening those ports so that players can come through. You also have to enable the Windows firewall if you happen to be running Windows, or Linux and Mac firewall capabilities or ports to open those if you're running on any of those two systems. But that means you have to have a little bit of an understanding around that capability to be able to do so. Now, if you've been doing it for years and you're comfortable with doing it for years, there's no reason for you to go through the process of changing now. I will state, though, however, that cloud is a lot more convenient because regardless of whether it's a public or a private connection, the SmiteWorks servers act as an intermediary between the two systems. So you don't have to worry about opening up any firewall ports in allowing players to come through and connect into your environment. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to start up a public cloud listing and show you how that gets displayed inside of the player session. And I'll clear that out just so that there's no confusion as to how I'm connecting. And at the same time, I will change my GM name to show you that it does not change the information here in the actual lobby listing. So with that in mind, I don't have anything else that I need to set up. So there. Okay, so I'm actually going to go through the process of beginning that connection. And it usually takes a few minutes for the DM screen to start up. Now, this particular session has no modules loaded, so it should be quicker than normal. And as a result, yeah, there we go. Okay, so we're done. Now, if I do a refresh here, my game should now be listed in the lobby. And it should fall under my account name. And there we go. So you can see here, and this little padlock box, by the way, means that the game is password protected. Additionally, you may have noticed that prior to me starting up the DM session, the icon here was red. That means that the session isn't yet connectable. Now that it is green, you can actually go through and connect to it. And this history is all of the previous connections that you have gone through and completed. So if I click on this, it will go through the process of connecting to it, fail because I have added a password to it, and you have to type that in and then click retry. Now it will complete the process of connecting, and we should see, there we go, that in the DM screen, we now have a player connected. The acquiring file list is where the player session is now attempting to pull down all of the modules that are open. At this point, I think the only ones that are open are the default SRD files. I haven't gone through and customized any of the files in any way, shape, or form. In addition, I have no firewall ports open. And when you use the cloud option, regardless of whether you're running it off of the same system or not, it's going to go out to the cloud and come back. That's the reason why the player session was a little bit slower. That might slow down depending on how many games are going at any given moment. And as you can see, I am now connected, and I don't have any character that I have to go through and load up just yet because I haven't created one. So that is how you can connect through a public cloud option. Now I will show you how the private option works. I just realized that I had actually forgotten to show you how the GM name comes into play. I will do that in this video, or this section of the video, I promise. All right, so I've now set things up to allow for a private connection through the cloud. And you'll see here that on the player side, my game is showing as offline. So I'm going to boop, boop, okay, start. So I'm going to let that load. And once again, this will take a moment or two. And what we should see is a difference in how we connect here. I'm going to show you that my game will not be listed in this list, and that we'll have to find it based on the name here. All right, so now things are up. And that didn't change. I wonder if it's because I have spaces or because I don't have a player connected yet. All right, so on this side, I'm going to scroll down and look for my account name. And you can see that I am not listed here. I now have to type in my account name here and click start before it will actually go through the process of connecting. Type in the password. And I'm not sure why Fantasy Grounds tries the password first. There's no location for you as a player to actually put the password in before it fails. So that might be something that they might want to look at. But otherwise, we're now going through the process of getting connected and pulling down the files. And I just had a thought as to why that could be the case. And it might be that Fantasy Grounds is looking to establish a secure connection to the server first before it goes through the process of typing in the password. So that may be why they do that. And I apologize for any background wind noise that you might hear. It's quite windy out today. All right, so I am now connected, and I'm going to just quickly type that in again. Yeah, and so even though I've typed in the GM name, that functionality doesn't appear to be working. So that might be a bug. I mean, we are running an early access version of Fantasy Grounds here, so that might still be something that has to be worked out. Or it's because I use spaces. So the next time I go through, I will go through and make sure that I don't use spaces in that particular process. So you can now see that I am connected. And that was a private listing. There's no listing that's going to show up in the lobby list. However, I was still able to get connected because I knew the account name that I was going to be connecting to. Now finally, I'm going to show you how to connect through the LAN option. And I'm only going to show you the localhost method. And the reason for that is that I don't want to release any information specific to my IP when I go through the process of typing that in here. And localhost is relatively ubiquitous when it goes through and shows a connection. So I've got everything started or configured on this side. I am GM. So let's change that without any spaces and see if I get a different result. Okay, and this should just about be done loading up. There we go. Okay. Now, in this particular case, when I click refresh, I am still not going to be shown as being in the list here. And that is because I didn't choose the cloud option. So it completely bypasses the lobby entirely. In order for me to actually connect, I still cannot connect this way. You'll see that it can't find the server name because I haven't registered with the lobby. But if I connect through one of the IP address I'm given, or the internal IP that I'm given, or localhost, I can go through the process of connecting. It's still going to prompt me for a password. Oops. Which is kind of redundant if you're connecting to your own system. But you can see how that whole process is fairly similar. Regardless which option you choose, The only difference is the initial selection and how you're going to connect. Once you actually get through the process of connecting, requiring a password and then pulling down the file list and getting connected into the system are all extremely similar. And once this is up and running, I will go through and check to see if my GM name has changed again. I just want to be sure, although I suspect it's not because of the label that is down here. And if I type in test again, that is correct. So it appears that the GM name functionality may not be working the way that they've indicated that it's supposed to be working in the wiki. But that's a minor point at this point. Everyone's going to know who the DM is, regardless of what tag that they're using here, and it's really there for your own specific personalization, if you will. But that is literally how you go through the process of joining your very first game. And I've decided to make this video in a way that was both DM and player specific, so that you could each see how the options affected the other aspect once you were connected. The last thing I want to cover is the history functionality here. And you can see that I've got two listings here. They're actually of different types of connections that I have made. In this case, this would be the localhost or LAN option that I have chosen. And you'll see that this icon here is still orange, even though I have the session up and running. And this is a LAN-based session that is up and running right now. That kind of it doesn't really help the player out any, because now the player has to always go, is the server up yet? Is the server up yet? That kind of thing. But for the most part, it's a relatively minor issue. And the topmost entry will always be the last session you connected to. So if you connect to different DMs, you may have to periodically go through the process of scrolling down this list to identify the session that you had connected to at a given point. So if you have like 3 or 4 games that you connect to regularly throughout the course of the week, and then you're into the new week and you're going through and connecting them again, the earliest in the week that you connect to is going to be at the bottom, and then so on and so forth. It'll slowly work its way up. I do find that is a little bit snug. I think you can get only 3 listings here before it triggers a scroll bar. But I can see why they've done it. You're not going to be connecting to a whole lot in the way of games. And you can remove them by clicking this little X option here. So you can actually remove any game that you've connected to in the past. So if you've decided not to play with a particular campaign anymore, you just remove it from your list. So there is a method of going through the process of cleaning it up. Now finally, around the cloud functionality, you'll see that my game is still in the process of starting up. This listing is gone green, but it's not yet connectable. So when I hit refresh, it actually tagged that as a green connection. Now it's up from my perspective, so I can go through the process of beginning to connect to the actual game. So it makes it easy for you to just simply go through and connect to a session you've already connected to. Now the one thing I've noticed, I've typed in the password once to this particular session. I haven't had to type it in again. That is going to make things so much easier going forward. And the only time that the password prompt will return is if the DM has changed their password. Maybe their password was exposed for some reason, or they felt it was time to just simply change the password. But you as the player don't have to go in and type it again outside of the first time that you type it in, as long as it's correct, which is a big change over the Classic Edition, where you had to type it in every single time you connected. And that was it wasn't a big pain in the butt, but it did add a little bit of an extra bit of work involved in getting you connected. So that completes the connection process, if you will, when you're going through and physically connecting to a DM session, and it also shows how the DMs can choose an option that best suits the environment they're most comfortable with, or the connection method that they're most comfortable with. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.